Hey, Steve Stine from guitarzoom here. And in this video, what I'm going to do is introduce you to a gentleman by the name of Luke Gallagher. Now, Luke is out of Australia. He's an amazing guitar player that I met on social media. I started seeing some of his guitar videos where he was just, he plays country music, but he's one of those old school, fast, clean, just talented country pickers. And it's a style that I don't play. But I've always really appreciated. So I got to talking to him and got to know him, and it's a great story because he's an old rocker when he first started learning how to play, and the reason he got into country music and all that sort of thing. And Luke is actually currently in Nashville, kind of getting to know people, learning the scene, learning not only the American scene, but the Nashville scene and how things work. And so he's just got some really great stories to tell you about how he's trying to break into the music scene and what happens in Nashville, and his story of going from a rock guitar player to playing the country music that he likes and things like that. So I hope you enjoy the video. If you like this video, please do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, like and share the video, and check out Luke's information in the description below. Okay, cool. I am here with Luke Gallagher. How you doing, buddy?
Great, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great. So right now you're in Nashville, is that right?
Nashville, Tennessee.
That's awesome.
Down here in the South, all halfway across all the way across the world.
That's awesome. Well, for those of you that don't know, Luke, I found Luke actually on Facebook. I started watching some of his videos. A lot of you probably don't know, but I actually grew up listening to country music. That was one thing that my parents listened to a lot of, so I listened to a lot of hee-haw with players like Jerry Reed and stuff like that. And I always found those players to be amazing. And today I always think of those guys as like the early shredders. Like they were the country shred guys that we all kind of do now on the rock side of things. So I was watching Luke and I'm going, man, this guy's really good. So I reached out to him and got to talking to him a little bit, because I'm going to be honest with you. This is my cat's tail, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Country music is something that, you know, I don't listen to a lot of country music, but I like a lot of the country guitar players. And Luke has just some really wonderful stories about how he got started playing and made this conversion to doing country guitar. And he plays it better than I ever would. So I thought it would be cool to have him do some videos and things like that, and let all of us learn a little bit more about how to play that style. So if you don't mind, Luke, let's just start back a little ways. Tell me a little bit about, first of all, where you're from and how you got started in playing and the kind of music you listen to, your influence, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I come from Perth, Western Australia. So whenever everyone thinks of Australia, it's Sydney. I'm 5 hours in the opposite direction that no one's ever been. So that's where I am. And there's not a whole lot going on in that town. There's not a whole lot of an industry or a huge music scene, so you're quite far away from it all. So you have to really discover it to really enjoy it, because you're not going to find it on the corner, or you're not going to hear it on the award shows live from Perth, Western Australia. It's never there. So
right.
So I was never very good at anything at school, and wasn't very good at sport or gym class or whatever they call it here. And I was bored in the school holidays during vacation once, and my dad had a bass guitar lying around and an acoustic guitar, and I went up like, wonder if I can do something with this. So I just started, like, you know, playing it like this and all that over my knees. And then I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. So I typed it in on the internet, because I still had that back then. This was about maybe 10 years ago. And the first thing that comes up is always Ultimate Guitar, no matter what you type in.
Right.
And then I just thought, I think I was using YouTube videos, and I was looking at tabs, and I was like, all right, interesting. 0 means the E string. And then it was actually pretty quick when I understood that. And I was playing, like, you know, Coldplay or U2 songs or Green Day in the next, like, couple of days. And I thought, this isn't too hard. I mean, tabs are really helpful for beginners. And then, like, I was like, okay, I'm good at this. I'm good at something finally. The next day at school, I was like, guys, I can play a Green Day song. And they're like, no, you can't. You really can't. Like, no one can play a Green Day song like that. and I was like, no, I can do it. And then went on to AC/DC, and then I put the bass guitar down and I got the acoustic out. I didn't have an electric, but I was trying to learn Thunderstruck on acoustic, and it was all down pick because I didn't know anything about alternate picking. It was just like no 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 no, and and then and I thought, wow, this is cool. Got an electric guitar, and then I got into Metallica because I was like trying to challenge myself more and more. And then I think Megadeth popped into it then, and then Guns N' Roses, and then I went full 80s, and I had a perm, and I had a leather jacket, I had white sneakers and a Batman shirt like Kirk Hammett, and I was like, I was shredding like all this minor pentatonic. I had no idea what I was doing, just like, and I was like, winning talent shows and everything, but I had no knowledge of anything, and I kind of wish that because I didn't really get any lessons. It was self-taught, and I wish I had some basic understanding of music theory at an early day. Because to me, music theory was just quarter notes, eighth notes, rests, and manuscript, and I thought that doesn't help me at all. I didn't realize anything about the mental theory that helps. It isn't all written. It's not sight reading. I always thought theory meant sight reading, but it doesn't. And then I thought I want to get better and better, and I finished school, and I thought, well, I need to get a job now. I've got to do something. So I was like, I don't really want to go to college or university because I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I'm not good enough to be a guitar player because they're all into that manuscript and theory and all that. And I managed to find a course for like songwriters and performers and stuff at the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts, which is where Hugh Jackman studied there.
Oh, I gotcha.
So that's where he comes from. And it's just a big like conservatorium of music. I guess it's kind of like the Belmont in Nashville or SIT, remember the GIT. And so then I studied there, and I got on stage, and it was pretty. There was a lot of pressure there because I rocked up and I auditioned with a big shreddy thing, and a piano thing. So I learned a little bit of piano on the way as well. But they were asking me like, okay, how about you play the F sharp there? And I was like, F sharp. Oh, great. What have I got myself into? And like the pressure of like play the G flat there, and then Luke, where is it? And I was like, G flat, and he's like, there, and I'm like, here, and he's like, no, G flat. He's like, no, not there, like up here on the D string, D string. And I was like, oh no, like in front of everybody, and saying stuff like you're sticking within the minor pentatonic thing too much. You need to break out of that. And then when I learned about key signatures, I was like, oh, whoa, that's crazy. That's high tech. That's everything. Like, that's everything about music is a key signature. Like, I have no knowledge of what it is I'm playing. My hands are just moving.
Right.
And then I think I was, playing in bands then, and still the rock metal thing. And I met my partner, Emily, who's a country pop singer here, well, in Western Australia. And she wanted me to learn a whole bunch of country songs for an acoustic duo that she wanted to put together. And I was like, oh, great, country. That's just what I want. But I thought, hey, like, she's quite pretty. I should probably learn these songs. So she gave me this red folder, clear sleeve folder, and in it had Dixie Chicks, and it had Shania Twain, and it had Landslide or Jolene, Dolly Parton, Johnny Cash, and I was like, oh gosh. I got my acoustic out and started like strumming these songs. But I remember listening to Shania Twain songs and hearing all these like great production, all these cool guitar parts and these like polished backing vocals, and because I not only do I like guitar, but I also like production, and I love like albums like the Black Album or Def Leppard's Hysteria or Dr. Feelgood. All those albums are just like an experience in itself. Like even if you like, even for the other instruments, like when I find myself listening to albums for the drums and the vocals and the songwriting, it's like guitar almost seems boring if I'm just listening to one album with the guitar on it. Like, so I found out the guy that produced Shania Twain was Mutt Lange, and he did Highway to Hell and Back in Black Bryan Adams, the Cars, as you know, of course, and everybody and anybody. And I thought, I like that. Like, all his favorite albums are my favorite albums.
Right.
Oh, sorry, his albums are my favorite albums. And now Shania is doing it. And I was like, who's the guitar player? And it's like Brent Mason, Dan Huff. And I
Yeah.
was like, these guys, I can't play that. Like, how come I can't play that? Why is that so hard?
Right.
And then, a friend of mine who was my lecturer at the time, he told me to listen to Brad Paisley's album. So I listened to a Brad Paisley album, and it was like all these crazy 16th note, really fast licks in a major key with open strings, and it sounded like, to me, that was my Van Halen 1 moment of hearing Eruption for the first time. It
Right.
was like hearing Brad Paisley's Huckleberry Jam, and it was just like lightning fast. It was clean, but it was also like really, it was kind of tough sounding. It wasn't the country I thought.
Right.
And so I started looking into that. And once I started down that path, everything kind of changed, and I had to switch on a lot more with theory and had to teach myself a lot more things. And I
Right.
think it really helped me improve as a player. I wouldn't say that I didn't learn anything from rock and metal, because I feel like the foundation of my playing came from rock and metal. And so did a lot of people. Like, a lot of people come from the rock and metal scene. Like Dan Huff, he was a shredder, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people in town are all shredders. So I learned so much from that genre, and the speed and everything like that from metal, the rhythm and my right hand and down picking, like, it was so important that I did that.
Right.
But country like really tightened it up and cut the fat off everything and got really intense. So that's how I got into it. Long story. Sorry.
You know, it's interesting. There's a couple things you said. I think it's interesting how when you're younger and you learn how to play, you know, you're learning the songs that you like. It inspires you to want to play because you're emulating these amazing musicians and bands that you like to listen to. But somewhere along the line, for a lot of us, it isn't just about the style, it's about the instrument itself and your ability of being able to do something new and unique or better on the instrument. So the lines for me, you know, I listen to all kinds of different styles of music. You know, I play in metal bands, and then I do original stuff, and then I also play in church. You know, I do all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
And I remember major, you know, I grew up playing, I mean, look at me for God's sakes. I grew up playing rock and metal like you did. And I remember getting a gig with a gentleman by the name of Mitch Malloy, who now is singing with Great White. You know, he tried out with Van Halen and different things like that.
Wow.
Mitch was from Dickinson, North Dakota. I'm from Fargo, North Dakota. And it was a great opportunity for me because it was the first time I'd ever actually gotten a chance to perform with somebody who had a major label and was on the radio and all this sort of thing.
Wow.
And at that time, I was very much a rock and metal guy. So my world was, I always tell people, it was minor for sure because that's what I did. And I always think like the more metal you go, the more sort of linear the playing is. It's not really about chordal interaction. It's more about shredding. It's more about being,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
being a little more acrobatic on the fretboard, and that's the way I played. So I'd never really had a situation where I had to really make these direct connections to chords. Well, anyway, long story short, Mitch flies up to do a rehearsal. We have one rehearsal before the show, and it's out again a number of hours away, and I'm trying to approach it from my normal perspective of playing, going, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake. I'm a good guitar player. I can do this. And a lot of his stuff was more pop. You know, it's not country, but it's certainly more pop.
Yeah.
And we got out to the gig, and I remember getting up there, and I was just lost because the way I was, later on in my life, I started teaching, like a lot of the local jazz teachers would send their students my way because everybody was stuck in that minor pentatonic thing you were talking about. Well, that's the way I tried to approach every one of his songs, and I was just failing miserably in front of a large group of people. And it was then that I went back and went, you know what, my ego completely disappeared, and I went, I don't really know what I'm doing at all.
Yeah.
So it's funny how you get into a certain, style of music and it feels comfortable. But it's really nice to be able to step outside that. And ever since then, I've always really had this love of that chord, that harmonic connection between the scale and the chords that's happening. So anyway, for you, you've made your transition from, Australia now to Nashville. What is it that you're doing in Nashville?
Nashville, I'm here to pretty much network because over in Perth, Western Australia, you can't do an awful lot. Like it looks like I have an extremely active music life and music career on my Facebook page, but really it's just me sitting in Australia doing covers and little videos here and there. And because so many people all over the world watch it, I guess I have a really big audience. But if I was to do a concert, there would only be two people there, my mum and dad. My mum and dad probably.
Well, it's a weird deal, man. This whole social media thing, being from Fargo, Fargo's a small town. I grew up here and I played all my life here. And I remember the first time going out to Minneapolis, which is a larger city, and trying out for an original metal band out there. And I was just terrified because I was like, there's just no way this is going to work. And it's funny how as you move out of that little bowl that you live in, you start realizing that you are you. Every day I wake up, I can turn on social media and see some 9-year-old kid out there that's better than all of us, right?
Yeah.
So the most important thing is figuring out what you're comfortable with, and just being that person, and finding out that the world is pretty cool that way to accept you the way you are.
Yeah.
And this goes back to something else that Luke said earlier. It's easy for us as guitar players to forget that being a guitar player, again, depending on what your goals are, isn't just about how many scales you know. It's your ability to play with other musicians and adapt to the style of what it is that you're trying to do and be part of the song, and not just, how fast the solo can be.
That makes sense. It makes complete sense. And one of the things about being a guitar player is I always wanted, obviously, to challenge myself. So going from the very softer rock like U2 and all that to AC/DC, the progression was from soft to more intense. And when it finally got to metal, I was trying to learn Yngwie Malmsteen stuff and Avenged Sevenfold solos or Marty Friedman solos and the more intricate stuff because I was ready to break out of that. And then when country came along and I started to get into that, I guess the next progression after country music was to get into the industry itself. So being here in Nashville is more terrifying than putting on the hardest song you could ever play and going to learn it. Some people can't do it and they're scared of that. But to me, it's more terrifying stepping into the real world. And so being here is the next lesson.
Right.
I guess, because I'm learning stuff every single day and playing gigs on the fly and having to learn techniques that I never thought, man, I wish I had figured out a way to practice this more.
Right. There's two things I want to say about that. Number one, there's a gentleman by the name of Matt Carter. He plays in a band called Emery, and I did an interview with him a while back, and he said something that was really interesting. He goes, I'm not a theory guy. He goes, I find that stuff really interesting. I love to get into the head of guitar players, which is what I enjoy doing too, is not just watching you play, but how you think. That's kind of what we're talking about here. And he goes, because he plays, he tours, he travels the world with his band, and they make albums. And he goes, it's always been interesting to me that somebody would want to spend 6 months of their life trying to perfect a Van Halen solo from 1981, literally for 6 months, and what they walk away from after that 6 months is the perfection of this one guitar solo. I'm not saying that it's wrong. His point was, instead of experiencing the world, write music, find people to write with, find people to jam with, find people to perform with. Convert this thing that you're doing into the real world and make something out of it.
Yeah. That's very true.
Yeah, and so for you, you were telling me a story about some gigs that you've been picking up in Nashville that I thought was really interesting. Can you share that?
Yeah, well, to me, a gig is either you learn a 45-minute original set list for an artist and you get a week or two to do it and you get up and you do it and it's great. or you have a cover band back home where you rehearse with that band and you say what songs you want to learn, and then you get on stage and you play those songs.
Right.
And then when somebody goes, play a song that you don't know, you go, we don't know that song.
Right.
Too bad for them.
Right.
Let's do Highway to Hell again. Or let's, and then you get paid a rate that's quite pretty good in Australia. And you have an agency that does it. They pay it. Even if there's 2 people in the audience, you go home with a full night's pay, a free meal, and free drinks, and
right.
you play the song that you're used to, and you're so comfortable with everything.
Right.
You go home and you sleep soundly. And then you come to Nashville, and you're at a bar, and someone goes like, do you want to jump up and play a set or 2? And you're like, what? Like what songs do they play? Like, can we talk about a set list? Oh no, there's no set. There's no set. Oh, what's the set then? It's like whatever the audience asks for.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, okay, well, what if I don't know it? Like, and then, but you don't want to say no to these things. You don't want to be the guy that's always going no, and you sit in the back of the room and always say no because you're too nervous. Right. But like, I get super paranoid about it because that's my weakness. And so I get handed the guitar. It's usually hanging down by my knees because I'm short. Yeah. And I'm too nervous to readjust it. So I'm like looking like
I know what that's like, man.
Kurt Cobain or something like that. So I go, and they're like, the first song we're going to do, like Johnny Cash. It's like, cool, probably Ring of Fire. And then it's like, no, it's not Ring of Fire. It's like Cocaine Blues or something. And I'm like, what? And it's like, you kick this one off and it's in E, and it's packed, like Nashville's packed, like there's crowds, the band's on multiple floors, and if you do a bad job, you don't get tipped really, like you're there for tips. Right. So you have to be awesome. And the guy before you was like, triple the amount of he had triple the amount of experience than you have. And a lot of the time they see you online and this image that you've made for yourself, and they're going, oh, Luke's coming up. Luke's coming up. Whoa.
You're terrified.
It's like, get ready for this, guys. Check this out. And I'm like shaking in my boots. And it's like, it's in the key of A, and it's a blues. And I'm like, to me, blues is like the Stevie Ray Vaughan, B.B. King, Chuck Berry, Johnny B. Good that I was learning, like that all the bands do back then. Not just this 1-4-5. I mean, I have a fairly good understanding of it. I'm not completely in the dark, but if it's not a blues and it's let's say a modern pop song, that's not just one. It's not always just 1-4-5. Sometimes it's like there's outside chords, or there's like a dominant 7, or instead of a 5, it might be a flattened 5 or a minor 5, and it's like, okay, something more intricate, or something like Jason Aldean or the rock country that's in drop D. With like metal riffs, and it's like, I don't know the actual riffs, and I need to play that song if it gets asked.
Okay, so I'm going to have you continue, but think about this if you're watching this. You're getting up in a in a packed room, playing stuff that you've never heard before. You've got to start a song that you've never heard before.
Exactly. So let's say I learned this song the day after, because a lot of the time in Nashville is you get asked to play these songs and you don't know 50%, but you do know 50% of the songs. You'd be surprised if you put the time in to listen to these songs and do your homework. If I didn't do my homework for this last year in Australia, I had a huge playlist of songs, and it helped me absorb it, and at least I know 50%. So I can hold my own a bit. But you usually go home that night and you write down the songs you didn't know, and you learn those because
they're probably going to pop up.
They are. So let's say it was in D. A lot of the time in country they drop the E anyway, because you get that low D. But this was a Jason Aldean song, and the riff's something like, it's just something like that. But I've never heard that at the time. And they're like, so it's in D, and it's like just like eighth notes type of thing, and I'm like, yeah, and then it's like just a pentatonic, and the band's like 1, 2, 3, da, 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 da. And then it's like, and then I'm like listening to listening to the bass player. Sometimes there's an acoustic guitarist as well.
Right.
Watching his hands, and he starts singing, so I bring the dynamics down, and I'm watching, and then it's still D for a lot of the time, and then they're like, I don't know, maybe 4. Like they'll be like, they'll mouth the word 4. Not 4. Can't remember what. Well, they'll be like, no, the 5 chord, and then you go to an A, and you kind of have to anticipate it, and then it's like 1, and they say 1 again, and then you go back to 1, and then it's like solo, and then I'm like, all right, solo, and then I'm like, okay, I mean, this isn't a major key now, so okay. And then it's like, by the end of it, the song's done, and you can't remember it, and it's like everyone's clapping and stuff, and you're like,
just a whirlwind.
And it's like, I got to do this for the whole night, like,
oh man, yeah,
oh my goodness. And then you get the one song that you know, like "Sweet Child of Mine" or something, because they still play that in honky tonks here,
right?
And it's like, goodness me, like, all right, let's keep going. And a lot of the time, if it's a clean song, you can't hide behind gain, like, and you can't hide behind a rhythm guitarist like Malcolm Young holding it down,
because there isn't one.
There isn't. So it'd be curious to know what AC/DC would be like without Malcolm, if it was just Angus, like what his guitar playing would be like to hold it up. Like it might sound really flabby and really thin and really maybe not so solid. So it's even worse than that. It's like a clean guitar, Angus Young by himself.
Right.
and with songs he's never heard before. Yeah. That's literally what it's like. You'd think it'd be one of those parody videos where it's terrible and it's all clean and it's like, but
well, it's trial by fire, and I tell you, if you've never done it before in any capacity, it's a great way of learning how to play, because again, you know, whenever I teach people, certainly with my private lessons, which I really don't do much anymore, but I would always tell them that I'm looking at them through a real world lens. My hope is that they won't just spend the rest of their lives sitting in their bedroom practicing whatever. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. I just always try and view people with that lens of, there's more opportunity for you. Like you could play with somebody, you could get together and do something. And what Luke is experiencing right now in Nashville is completely life-changing, because you learn so much as opposed to staying in your comfort zone, just practicing the same exercises every single day.
Yeah.
You know, so my point of all of this is just to introduce Luke. If you've never heard of him before, check his stuff out, and I'll put some links to his website and stuff like that, or his Facebook page and things like that. And then sometime in the near future here, Luke and I will be doing some videos, again, trying to look at perspectives on how he perceives something, how I perceive something, and try and give some insight on different ways of playing. And of course, for me to learn from Luke, just because I'm really interested in his approach of how he looks at improvisation. So real quick before we finish up here, Luke, because I know you got to get going and I've got stuff I've got to do too. Let's just leave with one little tidbit of information that somebody might be able to use. If you're coming from the blues world, or you're coming from the rock world, but you're interested in learning more about major soloing, be it pop music, be it country music, whatever, when you go to solo over something, just if you could kind of summarize, when you look at something like, let's say we're just looking at a simple 1-4-5, like an ADE.
Yeah.
When you're hearing those chords, when somebody yells out, okay, solo, what are you thinking about in your head for those chords?
The quickest thing that I could say is, besides knowing your notes, at the end of the day, I wish I had learnt my notes, because you need to know where the root notes are, and you need to know where target notes are. So you want to know where your 1, 3 and your 5 is, or if you want to flatten something, you got to know where that 7 is. I'm still slow at that, but that's super important in Nashville. So if you know that, the other thing would be, I was really good with the minor pentatonic. I'm still in D here, sorry. And I was really familiar with that because of AC/DC and Metallica and everything. And most of the time in a rock or blues song, you can just resort to that and add in all these extra colorful notes that really make it super interesting. But the basis is still the minor pentatonic. And I don't think that's horrible, because I think some of the best solos ever a minor pentatonic. And I think there's a difference between a really bland minor pentatonic that has no drive or no thought about where it's going, no outside notes or color. I'd say that's when pentatonic sucks.
Right.
But I think some of my favorite solos of all time are always built on pentatonic. So I still take that same mindset. So if, let's say, Highway to Hell, I would be using a minor pentatonic because that's like a minor key.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say Wagon Wheel or something, which is a really popular song here, I would take that minor pentatonic and I would take the key of A and
Mm-hmm.
I would find what its relative minor is. Because at the time when I started, I didn't really learn the major pentatonic. I mean, you could just learn the major pentatonic scale and then just apply it there and meander, I guess. But key of A, I go down to the relative minor, which is F sharp. So I go down to the F sharp minor and I would play the F sharp minor pentatonic, but I would always try to focus on the A, which is here, and the A, which is here, which is there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden it sounds country, because I remember doing some rough demos for Emily back when I was into metal and rock a lot. And it was in the key of A, and I was just like soloing in the key. And I was soloing in A minor pentatonic over a key of A major.
Right.
And sometimes you can do that to force like a rock feel onto a song, or you can mix and match it. But if you're only playing a minor pentatonic, you have all these clashing notes and it sounds really wrong. It sounds real. Same thing as if you were to put a major pentatonic on not Back in Black, but you know what I mean, like a Metallica song.
Yeah, right.
Battery, and all of a sudden you come in with a major key. Right. So the same thing happens for country. So key of A, I would go down to here. I would put in other things we can talk about, like all the different country techniques, like double stop bends, a lot of open strings, but it's still just like that. And then the D comes along, and I might go like that. And all I'm doing here is I'm playing sixth, I think they're called, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they're so melodic, and you know that it's going to sound really cool. So I would have been here, and that's following the D chord, because in country a lot of the time the notes have to follow the chord progression. You can't just shred in the key of A and that's it. I'm sure you can, but you target the D here, and then it goes back to A. And then the E comes along, and you have an E here. And you can use all those notes. Otherwise, I would go here and maybe put in a little like arpeggio, a little dominant 7 arpeggio, and then go down to, and that was the D, back to D. So I was soloing over the A, D, A, D, E, D, and then back to A. So like I'm still thinking of the basses as still major pentatonic, using the minor pentatonic scale in its relative minor. But I would think about when the chord change happens, a lot of guitarists still steal licks. Like a lot of the guitarists in town are just stealing licks and making it their own. So some of those lightning fast ones are all pre-thought of from somebody else. If I'm stuck, I would just do what I just did then and literally start with a minor pentatonic in a major key, and then I would maybe do some intervals, which are really popular in country, maybe some double stops, some bends, and when it gets to the second round of the solo, maybe go up the octave up to the F sharp minor here. Kind of makes sense a little bit,
right? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so basically, the premise is that even in country, you know, we get this, like what I'm always trying to teach people is learning like the fundamental bass scale, which would be minor pentatonic or major pentatonic or whatever it might be, is good, but it's always adding some element of color to it, whether it's adding new notes or changing up your emphasis over various different chords that are happening. And we're seeing that happen as Luke is playing. He's not just staying in this pentatonic, just meandering through it. He's actually going, okay, well, here comes a 4 chord, so now I need to do something a little different. Even adding in the dominant 7th and things like that. So those are things that we're going to explore once Luke gets back home to Australia, and we can start kind of trying to work through some things to give you guys some ideas of different ways to approach different styles of music. So, Luke, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you hanging out with me today.
Thank you.
You got a busy day planned, I'm assuming?
Yep, I've just got meeting people, going out for lunch with people, and a lot of people have messaged about, hey, you're in town, you're from Facebook and Instagram, let's grab lunch.
Yeah, right.
Let's jump up on stage here. Like, what are you doing tomorrow? So just trying to meet everybody. And
that's great. That's very cool.
Yeah, so thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time. And again, we'll stay in touch. And when you get back, we'll get going on our project. So thank you so much, Luke. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I'll talk to you soon.
All right. See you later.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that video. Luke is an awesome guy, and please make sure that you check out his information down below in the description. And please do me a favor. Let me know if there's any other interviews you'd like me to do, any videos that you'd like me to make. And please do me a favor, subscribe to the channel and like and share the video as well.